everybody, Patrick Conn here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. We had a big fight last night. That's what we have to talk about today. I'm here with my dude, Aris Pina, CompuBox operator. It's important in a moment here, and also just a fellow fight fanatic like myself. Aris, what is up, bro? How you doing?
Good, man. Still riding that high from last night. Even though it wasn't the fight that everybody, was really hoping for in terms of excitement, but I think we finally closed the book on this trilogy. Both guys seem like, they finally were content with everything. And yeah, all in all, it was a good night. And yeah, man, I worked the fight last night, so there's that.
That's true. I was going to say all those numbers you see, but they actually didn't show the numbers up on the screen a whole lot, which sometimes can be good because it's not as distracting when there's as much going on during the fight. But they were talking about the numbers. They did mention the numbers a few times, which is great because you were doing those numbers, dude. And
Exactly.
yeah, man, like you were saying, it's just the atmosphere of a Canelo fight these days is kind of like a De La Hoya fight from yesteryear. Not quite a Mayweather fight, but pretty close. I mean, this era's version of that, if you as it were, So pretty cool.
Canelo, we've talked about it before, man. There's differences between being a really popular fighter and being a superstar. And Canelo is like a global superstar. He's known by everybody. And even like common fans, you mentioned the name Canelo, most of the time they've heard of him. Like he's just one of those guys. So Triple G is another one too, man. Like I wouldn't now he's not on the level of Canelo, but he's over the years, his popularity and the sponsorships he's had, the exposure he's had and everything like that over the years too has made him very, very popular. So yeah, man, when they finally got to fight, these were huge events. And even though Triple G has been inactive over the past few years and was clearly on the back end, and Canelo was coming off a loss, this was still considered a big fight because there was a lot of unfinished business with this one. First fight, a lot of people thought Triple G won. The second fight was still really close itself and didn't really um, leave any conclusive answers. So we needed this one. And we finally got
Yeah,
it.
dude. It's Golovkin's still a very big name.
Yes.
They did a really good job at HBO, and his promotional company management did a really good job of pushing his name out there for a handful of years, enough so that even casual fans, not everybody knows even Golovkin, but they know Triple G. Like, it was a
Of course, it's just easy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, dude. They did a really good job marketing that. And so he's still a big name. And I thought that he overall put in a fairly admirable, I would say, effort last night, because early on it sure looked like Canelo was about to run away with the fight, if not get some sort of like, late round stoppage or something like that. Golovkin just didn't look good. He couldn't catch up. And then finally, as Canelo started to slow down, Golovkin jumped into another gear. It obviously was not enough to win the fight, but it was enough to ensure that he didn't lose more badly, basically. And he definitely kept it competitive with Canelo in the second half of the fight. It was just that the first half of the fight, there was so little, it was so little, and he looked so slow. But yeah, to be able to come back against Canelo and withstand some of the shots he was getting hit with, dude, he took like 30 shots to the hip, man. like like really hard hit shots to the hip. So
I was counting Golovkin last night. So like the beginning of the fight, like you said, Pat, each fight, if you really think about it, Golovkin took a little bit of time to get on track. And it was like in the first fight, it was after like the first 3 or 4 rounds, then he started kicking into another gear. And that's when he started, kicking Canelo's ass, so to speak. Second fight took a couple of rounds longer, but same thing. Once he kicked into another gear, it the fight became really competitive and obviously really close and whatever. But this fight, for the first 8 rounds, man, I'm counting Golovkin, and the guy that I counted back in the 2010s when when he first got on HBO, like what was it? He made his debut around 2012 or so, and just started wrecking guys left and right, and everybody started avoiding him. Was clearly not the same fighter anymore. The guy that I remember who was a dedicated body puncher, who
did
would
you
just
do the
go in.
punch zone on him?
Yes, I did punch zone and CompuBox for him. Yeah. Um, I worked for CompuBox. I did Curtis Stevens and Daniel Gill. And for Punch Zone, sheesh, probably every other fight you can imagine for him on HBO.
Yeah, totally.
So, because I literally, man, like I was almost every Saturday night, with the exception of a very few, were spent at either HBO studios or on the road. Good times. But back to the fight. It took a while, man. Golovkin. The only thing is, like, he was throwing more than Canelo, because Canelo still is very, is a very moderate puncher and doesn't really throw a lot. He's very he obviously, like, he flows in flurries sometimes, and like he can throw like a little burst of punches, but at the same time, obviously, he's just waiting and just like piecing everything together and just waiting for the perfect plan of attack. And when he does it, like with his uppercuts, hooks, everything like that. So Golovkin was letting him dictate the pace, though, and especially landing the more eye-catching punches, because the main punch Golovkin was throwing was just his jab. He's always had a very dedicated jab, and always a very good one, but the rest of it, where like the jab would work, would be the base off of his combinations that he would inevitably throw. He gets you on the ropes, he start throwing that right hand, hooks, other stuff. He still wasn't doing that. Everything was just going on the jab. His body attack was non-existent, and he was letting Canelo dictate the pace and landing the more eye-catching punches to build a sizable lead. His face was getting marked up, and by everybody, especially on the timeline and everything else. He was looking every bit as 40 years. And, there was suspicion that Canelo, if he really steps it up, he might be able to stop him, whatever. But, holy shit.
Yeah, we both had too much fun last night, dude. We were yelling or something because we're both all, or there's some other reason. Nobody knows.
But, there was a noticeable turn, though, by around round 8, round 9, especially round 9. That's when Triple G finally started kicking into another gear. And you're wondering, what took you so long? Because he was just fighting almost in the days earlier, I'm sure you agree with that. And
yeah,
but once he kicked into another gear and Canelo noticeably slowed down, in 3 out of the 4, in the 9, 10, 11, and 12, Triple G outlanded Canelo in 9, 10, and 11. And Canelo outlanded Triple G by 1 punch in the 12th round. So I'm not saying base this whole thing on copy box numbers or whatever like that, but I'm just giving you an idea that like the fight did change a little bit in the late part of the fight.
Yeah.
And if you think this was a complete whitewash, it really wasn't. Like, I mean, it was a close enough fight where it was, I don't think it was 115, 113, but 116, 112 is definitely in the ballpark, and I have no problem with that,
Yeah.
And if you want to give like a swing round in one of those parts, then I guess you would go to 115, 113, because that's how one of those judges ended up that way. But regardless, this was the most definitive fight, and hopefully it just ended everything.
Yeah, I think that from my perspective, it definitely looked like early on Golovkin was like, it's tough to know whether or not he was waiting, because he's, in general, he has a history of being a slow starter, not going, not hard charging in the early rounds. And so it's kind of tough to know, was it him kind of biding his time and seeing if Canelo was going to get tired, or was it him unable to pull the trigger? And it seemed like it was the latter. It seemed like he was really having difficulty pulling the trigger on the openings that were there, because they were the same openings that were there in the first and second fight for the most part. But he clearly was not jabbing as much. Like, for instance, in the first fight, I think the first fight, like the difference between how Golovkin fought in the first fight, in which he was probably most effective and most people felt he won. I thought he won that first fight, not like going away, but I thought he won firmly, but closely. Totally. And the big difference between last night and that first fight is Golovkin's jab. He was throwing a really dedicated jab in the first fight. That's the kind of thing where a fighter like Canelo, you mentioned earlier, he doesn't throw a lot of punches. And that's just his style. But at the same time, I think that people get like, and I swear I'll bring this full circle in a second, but people get confused when they watch Canelo and they're like, what is he getting tired at? He's not even like throwing punches. But the way that he fights, he's not just kind of like, relaxed Jersey Joe Walcott in there, dude. He's fucking coiled. Like, he's ready to go at any moment. And just even having that kind of stance takes up your energy. It soaks up your energy. And so using that kind of like fast twitch response, whatever you want to call it, to counter and to open up and be explosive, just even being in there and on the ready takes your energy. And so by the time it's 9, 10, round 11 or whatever, it's tough for him to get those openings, and he starts relying a little bit more on like brute force and shit like that. Canelo, that is. And so, and that being said, like I was saying, Golovkin not throwing nearly as much punches, but in the first fight, he was using his jab to make sure that Canelo couldn't explode, that he couldn't open up, that every time he tried to give that counter, like one thing Canelo was doing like all throughout the first half of the fight last night was dipping and then going with the hook up top, dipping, hook up top. And Golovkin just couldn't get away from it. For some reason, he was doing the same thing every time, where he was fading back like this and then swiveling, then pulling his rear leg back. And then Canelo was just stepping with him and hooking every time. And he was just like, bam, you know, his head was taking it every single time. And that was one of the reasons why he was getting all marked up on that right side of his face. And so in any case, he was not able to use his jab to disrupt. He wasn't able to use his jab to throw off Canelo's rhythm. Canelo's very much a rhythm and kind of timing fighter. And when you can't disrupt that, it's gonna be a long night. And it sure looked like Golovkin was gonna have a long night last night. It was just that obviously the mixture of Golovkin, I guess, becoming uncorked, getting going, whatever, and then Canelo slowing down meant that Golovkin had an opportunity. But I think that's where the age enters in. He wasn't able to seize the opportunity, not like he would have 5-6 years ago.
It's totally, man. And there was flashes of like, you know, earlier Golovkin too. I don't remember what round it was, but I'm sure you know this, where he threw one of his, I would call it one of his signature shots where he throws it over the top. Like, you know, and that's when he was like getting going a little bit. He had Canelo on
Yeah,
the
that's
rope.
what he got Rubio with.
Yeah, exactly. And he was landing at that point. Like when you can see he was getting in the rhythm, like it was probably around round 10 or so, but he had Canelo on the ropes and he threw finally started throwing some flurries. And as he threw one, you know, a couple of them were like the over the top shots and they were landing. And I remember smiling. I'm like, oh shit, like, you know, he's feeling himself again. I like this, but like, it's because he's older and this fight took place so much. This third fight took place so much longer than when it should have taken place, that same thing. Like, you know, by the time he finally started getting into a groove, it was too little too late, you know?
Yeah. So it seems like we pretty much saw the fight identically, and you know, in the kind of 9-3, 8-4 kind of range for the most part. And we watched the same kind of fight. So I guess it does have to be asked, it does have to be discussed at some point. After the fight, Canelo, like, you know, almost like the first words out of his mouth was like, I'm a fucking warrior, I'm gonna do this shit. And I'm not talking it down, because fighting with a hurt left hand,
Yeah, that's right. He said he has to get surgery, right?
which I believe also, because actually I was, for whatever reason, I was Sherlock Holmesing this shit. And after the fight, there was some photos he posted on social media, and he's going like this, and then you could see that his left hand, he's not clenching, like he's not making a fist with his left hand. It looks like it hurts. So anyway, whatever. I'm not making excuses for him or against him. I don't really care. It's up to him. But it does kind of seem as though I do have to take what he's saying with a grain of salt, because here we are in 2022, and it's taken until 2022, which sounds ludicrous because people were making jokes about it taking into the 2020s back in like 2015 to fight Golovkin or to finish up, you know, whatever. And it's taken until 2022 to get a definitive victory over him when he's clearly past his best. I mean, was that a strategy? Was that on purpose, Aris?
To a degree. Remember in the last show, the last time we were previewing this fight, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, Canelo definitely, out of spite, didn't give him an immediate fight after this, because
yeah, at least out of spite, for sure.
Sure. Like, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm the A side. You want to talk shit and like accuse me of X, Y, and Z, then I'm gonna, you know, punish you and deny you a shot at me. And he did that for a while until finally this deal that was set up by DAZN and everything, he was like, all right, I'll just take it. But he also knew, I mean, also too, it was strategy to a degree, because I think he knew the longer he made a weight, the, you know, the more the Golovkin will be deteriorating, because there was a slight noticeable difference between their first fight and second fight and how he's performing, and how each fight, how he was, you know, how he was decelerating a little bit. So yeah, I think it was, you know, out of spite and strategies. But by the time he finally got it, he was able, you know, obviously their careers are going in, you know, different trajectories right now. Like Canelo is still at the top of his game. Golovkin, not to say he's not still at the top. He's still obviously an elite fighter. but the days of him being, the destroyer that we knew are long gone. So yeah, it was probably just a little bit of both, I think.
They mentioned it last night on the broadcast. I think they even mentioned it during the introductions about how he had like 350 amateur fights or something.
Tons. Yeah, he's
That
had
adds
that
up,
long
dude.
career. I mean, also too, when you come from like the countries out there where they do have long decorated amateur careers that sometimes don't even turn pro. Um, but when you look at their amateur career, that's like the length of like 3, 4 pro careers, and then he turns pro. Like we said too, man, out in the hinterlands, being ducked and dodged by everybody and everyone, while he was the WBA regular champion, finally gets the exposure on HBO, which was a decade ago, and from there just starts, a demolition job on the middleweight division. Still can't get the elite fight that he's craving though, man. At one point, the money guy would have been Chavez Jr., which is hysterical, in retrospect. Sergio
Yeah,
Martinez.
for a minute there, it looked like they were about to try to make that fight, and I was like,
They
"Oh
were
hell
trying
yeah,
to.
let's do that. It'd be fun."
Yeah, they were definitely going to. I know that they sparred at one point or another, and there was talk about it, definitely. And
Ugh,
Chavez.
Golovkin just would have given him some work, dude.
Oh my
Oh
God, he would have
god,
beat the living daylights out of him. But I mean, at that point, I don't think Chavez had been completely exposed. He was still known as Mr. Durability.
yeah.
So I think there was some questions to it. Anyways, but there was that one. There was Sergio Martinez, who clearly didn't want any piece of him. Miguel Cotto, who went out of his way to say if he wants the belt, he can take it. I don't want anything to do with him at all. And then Alvarez, who also made him wait for a while before he finally did that dramatic "You're next, my friend" bullshit. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Dun 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 dun
yeah,
dun
yeah.
dun.
Like, really?
You, my friend, you're next.
Yeah, like all right, Hulk Hogan,
Just fight him, bro.
pushing him out, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just fight him. Nah, yeah, it's dude, it sucks. You do have to on some level feel kind of bad for Golovkin. I said on the preview, I did think that he got a little too out there with his trash talk and started maybe needling a little too much
Mhm.
and not realizing who he was doing it at, and that Canelo would be petty about it. I mean, you kind of have to assume somebody will be if they hold that much power over you in this situation. But I'm not
Totally.
saying it's right. But like I said, you do kind of have to, I think, feel a little bit bad for Golovkin because of those circumstances, because he did deserve a shot at the real middleweight title, the lineal middleweight title earlier than he got it. And at least I get the feeling watching the fight last night and then just seeing how the trilogy played out, you do get the feeling that 2015, 2016 era, Golovkin, he might have defeated Canelo.
Totally.
And the only real saving grace, which is not even really a saving grace, because you can't give Golovkin credit for those fights. He didn't fight those fights like you'd like to, because you'd say, yeah, he probably just smashed the shit out of Martinez. He probably would have just put Cotto in a small box and then kicked him down a hill, of course. But I mean, yeah, like you can't give him credit for those fights. He didn't fight him. The only saving grace here, and it's not that much of a saving grace, is that also goes against those fighters. That also goes against Martinez and Cotto, that they were like, fuck no, and ran the other way when presented the opportunity, not only to fight him, but to fight him for good money. So it's like, there's not really much of an excuse for that type of shit. And that counts against them too. It's just that it sucks for Golovkin, because he's obviously going to go down in terms of greatness below Canelo. I mean, and I guess the other portion of this is what Golovkin was saying after the fight. And then he says, guys, I still have 3 belts in middleweight, guys.
It's true. That's right.
Which is true. He's still, if he can make 160 pounds comfortably, I don't see really any middleweights right now that are, just going to come by and pick him off. I don't anyway.
Middleweight, right?
What's that?
Charlo is at middleweight, correct?
Well, and when I say that, I mean like a fight that's likely to happen, because that doesn't really.
I know, but here's the thing. This is what I want to bring up really quick. Is that the aftermath of this fight? Golovkin now has said recently, and he said it more than once, he's a free agent. He's done with.
That's a good point. I forgot about that until the words left my mouth, and I was like, oh yeah.
But like he's mentioned that now that he's a free agent and he doesn't have any obligations to them. So yeah, DAZN got their third fight with Canelo that they coveted from the very beginning, and now that he's a free agent, well, I think he's going to try to, take in the opportunity to see what offers he's going to get, as he deserves. And
And I'd love that fight. I'm not trying to poo-poo that fight at all. Like,
oh
I
my
just,
God, man, I'm
yeah,
sure
I totally
PBC is
forgot about the
definitely going to
free
give
agent
him.
thing.
I guarantee you, PBC will give him a very sizable and lucrative offer if he would go over there to fight Charlo for that one. And I'm all for that because that fight would be awesome.
Yeah, Charlo has just enough. Like he's just inconsistent
Jamal, right?
enough.
I always get them to
What's that?
Jamal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just inconsistent enough, excuse me, offensively, that I think that there are opportunities that Golovkin could lean in and take. But and on top of that, just like in this fight, like in the fight last night, you give Golovkin the opportunity to land punches, and it's like, it's just not good. You can't sit around. And I think that Canelo had gotten kind of acclimated maybe to 168 pounds a little bit, perhaps sparred with some bigger fighters, whatever, that he just wasn't daunted. He wasn't as worried about Golovkin's power last night as he was in the first two fights. But, yeah, and that's nothing against Charlo at all. It's just that I think that it's probably a slightly more winnable fight for Golovkin. However, like we also talked about in the preview, dude, going up and then back down and weight when you're older, especially.
True.
Dude, that can Chris Bird your ass, can Roy Jones you.
I mean, I'm not gonna say he's going down to 175. That was pretty a steep thing that both guys did. But good point at being 40 years old.
Yeah, obviously that was dramatic, but still.
That was very. Oh my God.
Oh my God, that was such an awful idea, Chris. Why, bro?
I'll never forget watching that live too, man. Because remember all the hoopla around it, like how skinny he looked, how good he looked.
And then Sean George was like, everyone was like, "Oh, okay, I guess Sean George is real good." And it was like, no, Chris Bird was just.
People were like getting hyped because I remember in the pre-fight for that fight, Chris Bird's wife, what was her name? Was it Tracy? Was it Tracy? Yeah, I think
pretty sure it's Tracy Bird. Yeah,
Tracy Bird was his sister too, so I don't know. Anyways, but they were being interviewed and he was like, oh yeah, Roy Jones was like saw me and Roy was like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, let's make the fight. Like he was all hyped because he lost. It was almost like the Ali thing, the Mirage when Ali fought Larry Holmes and you look good, but clearly you just, and that was brutal to watch because Sean George beat the brakes off. But,
yeah, he just had no legs, dude. Just
totally.
awful.
And then when Roy moved to heavyweight, fought John Ruiz, probably could have stood there and beat Evander Holyfield for a very lucrative payday if he wanted to, or some other heavyweight around that time, and instead decided to go back to light heavyweight and get bludgeoned by Antonio Tarver. I mean, so yeah.
He allowed himself to get trolled into that fight. Unfortunately, Tarver just kept showing up. I gotta give him credit though.
He did the first fight. In the first fight, Roy somehow won it. Look,
yeah. I thought that, Roy was like, he like pulled that out. Like he was getting beaten up. And then it was, I think the last two rounds, he like kind of just sacked up and was like, fuck it, let's go. And then fought his way out of it and somehow won. But like, and then we know what happened from there.
You can't do that. And also too, I think the other example, Chad Dawson, that's one that you don't get talked about enough.
Yeah. Also his own fault.
Yes. When he moved down to fight Andre Ward at 168.
He called Ward out at 168 and Ward was like, okay. And then everyone was all mad at Andre Ward. And it was like, he said it. He offered. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, Ward beat the shit out of him.
I was sure that Chad was going to do well in that fight too. I
was like actually pretty hyped about that one, man. And Ward just beat daylight.
Dude.
I wasn't
prepared.
But I certainly hope that doesn't happen in Golovkin because here's the thing. I guarantee you all the middleweights that were watching this tonight were probably crossing their fingers and crossing their toes, hoping that Golovkin didn't get knocked the fuck out so that he would like lose at least a very competitive decision, that he would say exactly what he said last night. Hey guys, I still have 3 belts. I'll be back at middleweight. Because Charlo, a host of other middleweights still see Golovkin as a massive payday, which he would be, and a name that they could put on their ledger as a legend, which he would be because he's, older and they see him as a winnable fight now. So a lot of those guys will watch and they're like, yo, even if he loses, please don't lose too bad, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Everything's good. And he's a free agent. Shit, we gravy. So
I might have to I might have to revise my statement a little bit because, yeah, I guess now that thinking about the free agent thing, Charlo does make sense because I think PBC probably would.
Yeah,
I mean, I
absolutely.
think, yeah, I think they've shown that they're willing to, like they're willing to spend money to make money, as it were. Like
I mean,
they'll put a
they've
decent
already
offer out
sent
there.
Golovkin an offer before. This wouldn't be their first time dealing with him.
Well, now there won't be any sort of attachment to DAZN or whomever or
Exactly right.
HBO.
Yep.
Well, and that's been what's happened in a number of on a number of different occasions where I know on the surface a lot of people want to argue about like, oh, so and so's ducking so and so, but what happens is it's just contracts, dude. It's fucking contracts. When you're
Oh,
contractually obligated to fight on this network and this network only, or this promotional company only, and these are the networks that they handle. But somebody else who's across the whatever is on something, and they also have an exclusive contract. That's what happened with Kovalev and fucking Adonis Stevenson, where people were saying Adonis is ducking so and so, Kovalev's ducking so and so, or whatever.
bro, don't bring that up, man. That's gonna hurt me because I was gonna work that fight. I even like I had worked all the Steven. Not to veer off track really quick, but like I had worked all the Adonis Stevenson fights, like ringside. Same thing with Kovalev fights. Like I was in Montreal so much that I probably could have got myself an apartment out there at that point. And beautiful city, by the way. And you know, all of a sudden, like you said, man, they like main events and well, I think Stevenson first like signed up with PBC or something like that, right? And then main events was like, oh, we're HBO guys, we're signed with HBO. There's no way we can do this, even though Pernell Whitaker moved, went across the street to fight Julio Cesar Chavez on Showtime pay-per-view back in the day. And who was Pernell Whitaker promoted by?
Main events. Well,
So
and that was the whole thing, was they're trying to portray it as something that it wasn't. And they
yeah,
were saying like, well, Adonis Stevenson is the one with the problem because they're saying that he can't fight on HBO. And it was like, no, it's both ways because you're saying he can't fight there. So it's the same, blah, 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 and that shit was a really unfortunate fucking miss because that was a hot fight for like 2 straight years and they just
oh
couldn't get
man,
it
that
done.
was the fight to make. That would have been awesome.
Yeah. And then
They were building it, man. When you have them showcased on the same card, I'm not gonna say it. Obviously, the star power is completely different, but you can compare it to like when Mike Tyson and George Foreman shared the dual bill in 1990. You know what I mean? With the intention that they were going to fight each other soon after that. That's when Kovalev fought. Back in when Stevenson fought Tony Bellew, and Kovalev knocked the shit out of
was that Silla?
Salak. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that one's always going to produce a funny memory for me because I actually thought Salak had a chance to win that fight, and I was telling all the
He's a
HBO.
really good amateur.
He was, and I was telling all the HBO people about it too. And we all have during the fight, like Salak got knocked out right in front of me, and I'm pretty sure I've told this story before, but like Salak gets knocked out in front of me, and then on the headphones, one of the HBO producer that had one, he goes, "Nice pick, Aris," and everyone starts laughing laughing in unison on the headsets together.
You're like, oh fuck, this
Yeah.
fool's like staring you in the eyes, and you're like, Jesus
Glassy
Christ.
just laying there, drool coming down his face, and I'm staring at him. They're like, "Nice job, Aris."
Man, yeah, he got blasted. That was awful.
Bad.
But
Hulk
yeah,
Hogan
dude,
standing over him, going, "Yeah."
well, and they had some history too. And come to find out, after Kovalev's fall from grace, it sounded like he had said some racist shit to Silla or about Silla. But anyway, we won't delve too fucking far into
That's
that
not about
goddamn shit.
But
But and then
you know what? Because Canelo flattened Kovalev. So.
oh my god, dude, yeah, that was extremely memorable. I'll give you that. The weight,
Oh yeah.
there were so many memes from that night, and then fucking yeah, dude. Just a prime example of good old DAZN.
They really waited for the UFC main event to end before.
Yeah, what a fucking.
I can't even imagine what was going through Canelo's head.
Oh, just please go ahead and go right before us. What a fucking. Oh my god, dude. Anyway, yeah, it's just really. I'm happy though. Like if that is true about Golovkin being a free agent and him being able to go wherever. Look, dude, I don't think that he looked straight up like shot last night.
No
especially
kidding.
given the last half of the fight where he turned
That's
it
what
up.
I'm saying. Totally.
And Canelo's, it wasn't like, it was still high level stuff. It wasn't like Canelo shat the bed himself and absolutely looked like shit and Golovkin couldn't do anything. Canelo was turning away his attacks. He was stepping it up himself. And so it was a good version of Canelo. And Golovkin didn't look like hell. I thought he still looked like the kind of fighter who could be viable, assuming he can still make 160 pounds. There are some fights there for him, or at the very least, there's still something there left for him to do. So I mean, they're joking last night about trying to make Canelo Andrade or even Golovkin Andrade.
Oh
I
God.
don't know what the fuck anybody's talking about with that noise, but whatever, bro. You fight with no body.
I mean, look, like there's Charlo. If Eubank Jr. comes out unscathed in October against Connor Ben, which in my opinion, I honestly think Ben's gonna smoke him, but I'm sure we'll do a preview on that eventually or something, talking about that rivalry. And so there's other lucrative fights that don't involve Demetrius Andrade. As much as Chris
Not
Mannix,
if you, yeah, not
as
if
much
you,
as Chris Mannix wants to obsess
not if
on
you ask
it,
Chris Mannix.
and his little pyramid scheme of him and Charlo and going around in circles of what they've talked about over the years.
Yeah, dude, they're gonna be at that fight selling Avon products.
you
Okay.
I think if that fight actually got made, his head would explode. But anyways, you're like, I mean, the thing is, Golovkin is the money man at 160, in my opinion, still. And
Isn't he still sponsored by Nike? Like he's still
I don't
got
know,
some.
man. I was actually wondering about that because usually, and look, I'm no expert on sponsorships and how you can, and if you're supposed to wear their gear 24/7, you know what I mean? But like the last few times I've seen his photos, he's not rocking Air Jordans. He's not really rocking the suits that he was the same thing that he was doing back in like when he was sponsored, when
Hmm?
he was heavily doing it. So I noticed that at least. But then again, I'm not an expert in terms of like what you can do and what you can't do. So I don't know. But
Well,
that
and
being sponsored by Jordan was huge for him. That was a huge look.
yeah. Well, and whether he is still or not, I mean, that would
Doesn't
obviously
matter.
that would
Yeah.
still be massive. But he's still very known. He's still a big name. He's still a hot commodity. He's still making a lot of money to get paid. He's still getting paid a lot to get to fight. And I'm not saying that necessarily dictates popularity, but I mean it's very difficult to justify those kinds of paydays when somebody's not popular, and he is very
Well,
popular.
when we talked about like the casual fan base, my day job, which I don't talk about often, but like I work at a hedge fund, right? And those people there are all about football and baseball and to a degree basketball and stuff like that. Soccer.
Highlight and
Yeah, and random,
polo,
yeah, whatever. So like golf, especially major golf.
Connect Four. No, I'm just kidding.
And but they know I work in boxing and other stuff. I don't talk about it a lot, but like when they were, oh, what are you doing this week? I'm working a fight. Oh, you working Triple G Canelo? Yeah, like they just know, people like that in general, they know. The bar I went to after the fight last night with my buddy, just to like just to wind down and have a post fight celebration drink. Same thing. Oh man, we were showing the fight. You were working the Canelo fight. Oh shit, that's awesome. Like those are the superstars now that they've reached that level that the casual fan
Yeah.
watch it. You know what I mean? And they'll try to show it at a bar if they can find it, afford it, whatever it may be. And most people at least heard the name, even if they're not that familiar with them and they can't give you like a career breakdown of them. They've heard the name.
Oh yeah. Yeah, dude, they're obviously still very bankable. I mean, Canelo, of course, but Golovkin should be going on to assuming he's not just straight up washed, which remains to be seen. We still got to see him come back from this because he took a lot of punches, dude. He got hit a lot more in that first half than I think we're used to seeing him get hit.
Absolutely.
And there were a couple moments where like he got hit and he kind of like froze up. Like he didn't seem hurt so much as that he was just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, why am I getting hit with this kind of thing? Like he was almost like, come on, like slap out of it, something.
I
And
didn't like. I don't want to see Golovkin ever get stopped, man. Look, we have these type of things where like we get attached to certain fighters over the years and all that. And I know Golovkin has his detractors because with all the admiration he's gotten over the years, it does get a little much. and you just kind of like, all right.
Yeah, it's like oversaturation, like overexposure. You know, like
Yeah,
when you hear Mexican style 10 times a day, you're like, okay, dude, stop. But
totally. But like when you see someone like when you see Roy Jones get slept, when you see Bernard Hopkins get knocked out of the ring for his last fight, when you see other, Pacquiao get knocked out, other guys, whatever it may be, like you see different. When I was a kid and seeing Terry Norris get knocked out by Keith Mullins and like all these other things, like when you see your child, when you see like people that you admire and everything finally get beat down and like you realize it's over, it's like fuck, man. I was early in my years of CompuBox. I was ringside as a trainee. I wasn't even working this fight, but just training. How cool is that? I was ringside for Calzaghe Roy Jones, and
you got to see Calzaghe do his little
shimmy.
And
and like, look, man, I was telling my buddy last night, man, I'm not gonna say I was the biggest Roy Jones fan growing up, but I respected the shit out of him and knew I was watching something like, like something that was completely unnatural. He was the Michael Jordan of boxing. And to see the guy that I considered like a Superman to myself of boxing as a kid, just getting clowned, beat up, worked, bloodied.
Yeah, dude, it's like watching Jordan getting dunked on while he's on the Wizards or some shit.
Yeah, man. And I'm not gonna say it didn't bother me. I was just kind of disturbed by it. I was like, bro, what is this? Like, that was my whole childhood was kind of like disturbed by it. I was like, what am I watching here? See, like you said, Calzaghe, boom, 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 and I'm like, yeah, I was like, Roy, do something, please.
Don't let him fucking clown you like that, Roy. What are you doing?
Yeah, I was like, what are you doing, man? Go back to being Superman. God damn it. So
do the fighting cock move. Come on, bro.
There was a few moments. What I'm getting at is that there was a few moments in that fight with Golovkin that, like you said, in the earlier rounds when I saw him back up, when he looked a little just bedazzled, befuddled, everything, and I'm like, oh no, but. To his credit, though, he came back, man. He's a different beast. Both of these guys are locks for the Hall of Fame. I think they realized after this fight that they made history together. That they, even though I wouldn't say that the trilogy, in terms of action, holds up with some of the all-time great ones, but they have earned their place in history for what they did with the trilogy, obviously. So
yeah, like they were intense in moments, but it wasn't like sustained action. It wasn't.
No, like people, it was a lot of people in the media this past week that were like ranking their best trilogies and all that. And obviously one of my favorite ones, and I think one of your favorites as well, Pat, Dennis Andrus, Jeff Harding.
Oh, hell yeah.
Is missing off the list of everybody's. But like a trilogy like that in terms of sustained action and just the way it was, that's a better one than what we got with Canelo and Triple G. But
shit, it's a trilogy nobody ever talks about. Pretty much nobody, which sucks.
What's that?
Banky Zaragoza, dude. That's a fucking.
Yes. Oh my god, good call.
Why the fuck is nobody ever talking about that shit, dude? Goes down. It's like
what a good fight. Oh my god, all of those were awesome.
I think two of the three, if not all three, were fought at the Forum in Inglewood. It's like, come on, bro. And they were all really good fights too. So anyway. Yeah, dude, it sucks that nobody brings those up.
Yeah, Paul Banky. You know what's crazy too is that I was like going through. I found a stack of like old magazines in one of my. Dude, I'm such a hoarder in my apartment. I found a stack of old magazines I completely forgot about, and one of them had an article about when Banky just got diagnosed with AIDS, HIV/AIDS, in the probably around the same time he got diagnosed before Tommy Morrison, so it was around 94, 95, and they were like, it was almost like a death letter in that magazine saying, pray for me, blah, blah, blah. He's still alive. He's still, by all accounts.
Yeah, obviously we've learned so much in the last, 20, 30 years.
God bless him, bro. That's, for a guy, if you knew his story and what the hell he went through.
Yeah, he was a very troubled young man for sure. And he literally had to get sequestered at a ranch for troubled young men who trained boxing, like way off in the fucking hills because he was getting in so much trouble. But yeah, that was an incredible trilogy.
That was really one. That's awesome. Yeah.
And they're all on YouTube too. Like they're all right up there, easy to watch, good watch. But yeah, that was, I have to say, over the years, there have been things that I've disliked Canelo for. I'm not buying the clenbuterol fucking excuse about the meat. Like, I think that's pretty fucking shady. I think that waiting on Golovkin for this entire thing, while I understand the pettiness and being spiteful, I think is still pretty weak. I also think that he's had most of his career, for the most part, handed to him on a silver platter in terms of being able to choose.
Clearly.
Although I do obviously acknowledge that he's put in the work. He's put in a lot of work, and he is a very hard worker and trains. So he's not like he's just being given everything. However, you know, you can't deny that he's been very privileged in that regard.
Yes.
So I mean, like, there's things that I haven't liked him for, and then like we were talking about earlier for Golovkin, I think that it's just overexposure, oversaturation. Like, I got sick of hearing the same fucking shit. Okay, bro, I know you're gonna say Mexican style after every fight, and you're gonna say good boy. I know you're gonna say, you know, like I already get the memes and the tropes, and they're funny the first couple times, but now you're pressing on it, and you're kind of like
classic days of that.
it's like you're not acknowledging now that you've done it too much. You need to move on to something new and get a new gimmick, but they wouldn't. They were just like kind of pressing that fucking button. So yeah, there are things that for both of them I haven't liked and have gotten annoyed by. And so this trilogy almost came to be for me. It was like, well, whoever wins this trilogy, it doesn't affect me because I'm not a massive fan of either guy to the point where it's like, I need him to win. I need this person to win. I just wanted it to be good. And luckily the trilogy was pretty good. But I will have to say it was a cool moment at the end of the fight where they both kind of seemed to, like, instead of being pissed at each other, they were like, all right.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay. And they brought it in.
To his credit, who's always been bitter after the first and second fight, and rightfully so. Don't get me wrong. Seemed like he was content with everything. So,
Yeah.
well, you know, with all that being said, well, we've talked a lot about Golovkin and his future. What about Canelo?
It's a good question, dude. He's still not a big fighter. Like, I mean, in stature, in terms of height, he's like, I think he's still like, he's like 2 inches, 3 inches shorter than I am, and I'm not like that tall.
Well, my buddy that was with me yesterday, he's around Canelo's height. I think he's been around Canelo for at one point or another. And he told me too, when he was next to him, they're around the same height. So Canelo is what, like 5'8" or so, 5'7.5", 5'8".
Yeah, he's like 5'8" or something ish. Like,
so when Mannix asked him after the fight, he was like, "Oh, you know, do you want to like right that wrong against Bivol?" And obviously, that's what he wants to do. And again, man, like from what I watched last night, nothing. Even though he decisively beat Triple G, it didn't convince me that he was going to be able to beat Bivol if they had when they fought a rematch. If anything, I mean, you think that Bivol was going to beat him even more convincing.
Yeah, to me, yeah, I agree. I think that none of Canelo's big options are options that are very attractive in terms of risk reward, in my opinion. While I think that David Benavidez is beatable for him for sure, many people seem to think that David Benavidez has got the fucking poison, you know, like he's got the fucking antidote or whatever Canelo's got.
He has fast hands, man, but it's not like anything Canelo hasn't seen before.
Nah, he can be fairly inconsistent himself. He's been fairly not unmotivated, but undisciplined. And on top of that, he seems to also have kind of fallen a little bit into this cycle of waiting on Canelo. So it's kind of like, you know,
everybody, like, what does he say? Payday, payday, payday. Everybody wants a payday.
And it's true. Like, he says it in an annoying way, and it's kind of dumb that he acknowledges that, but at the same time, it's true.
But he's right though, man. Like, Canelo is in the Floyd seat when you think about it.
Right.
You know?
When you become a gravitational force, when everything around you changes.
Everybody wanted that Floyd payday. Everybody was praying, hoping, and praying. Hey, did I beat that right opponent that's gonna get me that Floyd payday?
From people like 3 fucking weight classes away, down to the people who on BoxRec are like, you know, at the top 250, like calling out, "It's my turn now. I'm 4-0. Now it's my turn." It's like, what? Who are you?
Who was the dude that knocked out that Willie something that knocked out the dude that beat Charlo from Detroit?
Oh,
Tony Harrison.
Tony Harrison, yeah.
Willie, who was it?
Willie Get Up. No, I'm just kidding. I can't remember his name.
Willie, I forgot his last name, but he even called out Floyd after I knocked. He was like, "Hey man," look, I'll throw my name in the mix if Floyd wants to beat. Like, everybody wanted. So like, you know how many people were lined up to fight
It's like
Berto?
people calling out Jake Paul now. You know, it's like everybody.
Yeah, totally. But you like imagine that line that was wrapped around the block to fight Berto because that seemed like the easy route to get Mayweather for some reason.
Yeah,
But
no, for a couple years there, it was
yeah,
apparently.
yeah. So until Berto actually got that opportunity out of nowhere. But
That was I wasn't understanding that fight at all. I don't think I ever did,
no
but
one did, man. That was very odd time. But yeah, everybody wants that Canelo payday, and rightfully so because look at the fucking purses of last night. Canelo made 45 million or so. Triple G made over 20 million. Right? That's insane. Me and my friend were talking about that last night. Insane when you think about that.
dude, they're even talking about like actors and actresses and shit like that, like people who are in movies. When people get paid that kind of money in a movie, it's like mind blowing. They're just
Yeah.
like, they go on a short list of like, here's the actors who have made more than 20 million in a movie. And it's like a really short fucking list. Like there are not very many at all. But
I made
then,
20 million. I'm not doing anything else in my life like that, man. I'm
yeah,
retiring.
dude, you're set.
Yes.
Like, I mean, assuming you're not an idiot, buy fleets of cars and shit, like you're set.
No, I'm just buying myself a really nice place and I'm chilling. That's it.
Yeah,
I
pretty
don't have
much.
much for much else after that.
Well, people do
Um,
want that payday. So yeah, it makes sense, dude. But a lot of people feel like Benavidez is going to be that dude to beat him. I'm not so sure. However, point being, like I said, risk reward. He's a tall guy. Canelo's not big. Benavidez seems like he cuts a fair amount of weight to get to 168 pounds. He's been hungry for that fight. And I think that that's a dangerous fight for those reasons. Going after a Bivol rematch, obviously a dangerous fight for several reasons. And I agree with you. Nothing I saw last night makes me feel that in a 12-round fight, Canelo's going to beat Bivol. It makes me feel like he's going to have to unload and either hurt Bivol or knock him out early on in order to take that win, because Bivol clearly has a style that's going to be a really, and the height and whatnot to really offset what Canelo's doing. So I think that he has some thinking to do. He's obviously going to have to recover if he really does have a messed up left hand and is going to have surgery. He does deserve a longer break. He deserves some
we
time
won't
off.
see until next year.
Yeah, he deserves some time off, dude. Like I was surprised that he was coming back to face Golovkin when he was now. So in any case, yeah, I think that he has some thinking to do, but I would personally like to see him stay at 168.
So would I. Absolutely, man. I would love to see the Benavidez fight, even though it didn't seem to be, how would I say it, very convincing after the fight when he was like talking and there was an interview and he mentioned that he said, they mentioned David Benavidez and he said something to the effect of, what the fuck has he done? Or something like that. He was like, he hasn't done anything. He hasn't really won anything like this. He doesn't really deserve a shot. I think he's more concerned and more, focused on Bivol because Bivol gave him that L. He knows he can't get the Floyd again. That was a long time ago. I think he's accepted it. He was young, whatever it is. That was a long time ago. It was probably like, what was that, a decade or so already? So Bivol was a more recent one. He's a complete fighter. He feels he's still the best in the world. And he feels that he had an off night with that one. Bivol, again,
I mean, you got to respect it, but it's
I
a bad
absolutely
idea.
respect it. I really, really respect it, man. Good moxie on him wanting to do that. But that's where I think he's going to go for this one after that. Even though he's still the super middleweight champion, I think he always feels that because, like you said, with his size, that he could easily move back down to 168 and not worry about it, as opposed to going to 175. You know what I mean? Because he's not going to weigh at 175. I don't think he'll always weigh a little bit below that.
And the hind end of that too, when we were talking about Canelo kind of waiting out Golovkin a little bit and that possibly being strategy, the hind end of that too is the possibility of Zurdo Ramirez doing some damage to Bivol in the meantime, maybe softening him up for Canelo. So I mean,
yeah, man, that's a big fight coming up too. Absolutely.
Honestly, that could be a smart move on Canelo's part because I mean, I don't really think Ramirez is the guy to beat Bivol, but he is he is a tough fighter. He is going to be in there. I don't think he's going to be easy to get rid of, and so he might give Bivol
he's
some
definitely
work.
motivated for this fight. This is a fight that he's been pursuing for a long time. The location, well, we've talked about that in previous shows when money talks. location locks. And well, I'm just glad that we're getting it, and this will produce probably whoever wins this fight. Yeah, is going to produce the number one viable fighter that Canelo will fight. If it is
Exactly.
Ramirez, well, Canelo's already gone on the record saying he doesn't like to fight his own countryman or whatever it is. But like Bivol, and it's such a goofy statement to say too, because you can't say that like
I think if they
first
put
of all,
money on the table, he'd fucking fight him. But
absolutely too, man.
yeah,
Especially
that's
too
a weird thing to
Julio
say,
Cesar
bro.
Chavez, Jose Luis Ramirez. Those guys were practically best friends. Ruben Oliveira is going through his round robin, fighting Jesus Pimentel and fighting, the dude that beat him for the Chucho Castillo and other ones.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here with that stuff. Anyways, there's talks about that, but like I think Bivol is the one that he really wants to go for. And if he was able to beat Bivol again, if he was able to beat Bivol in a rematch somehow, then he obviously would be elevated to be the top guy. And then either at that point, he would wait for someone like, I hate to say it, but like Spence has always made rumblings about moving up to try to challenge him one day or something like that. Or he would even talk about moving to heavyweight. So God only knows. Who knows? But
Yeah, it's wild shit, dude. But I mean,
he's
they're
still young, but I think we're at that point now where if he's not in his prime, he's like at that point where he's on it and about to move past it slightly. And we're gonna see where he goes with this other part of his career. But yeah, with this injury and everything, it's gonna be interesting to see where he has to move on with it. You know what I mean? There's a lot of probabilities with him. Triple G, we know he's going back down to middleweight. We see the options of available opponents for him. Canelo, it's more diverse. You know what I mean? He has different things to go for after Bivol, of course. So
yeah, and I think that also the possibility of him having a second loss to Bivol. I think that we've already seen, thankfully, that Canelo is mentally resilient enough that he came back from that loss and
yeah,
he made his peace with it, or at least enough that he defeated Golovkin soundly. And so I think that a second loss, I don't think it would like wreck him unless he got really fucked up. And that is a possibility because he was getting hurt in that late in that first fight, but or at least looked really tired. Point being, a second loss, unless he got really messed up, I don't think that would really hurt him mentally either. But it's just, yeah, I just I get it. Like I said earlier, I got to admire it, but I just think it's a bad idea. Either way,
it's that Shane Mosley mentality, man. Like
yeah, like
Mosley
yeah, I
always
need to
looked
get
at
back at Vernon Forrest, but it's like, no, you
immediately.
don't.
And the same thing with Winky Wright. Remember? Yeah.
Yeah, no, you don't. You don't need to get right back in there with him. I respect that you want that, but you shouldn't do
You
that.
can make the fight a little bit closer, but like even though Mosley, caught a few L's, everybody remembers him fondly because he always took that challenge and always would
It's
jump back
true,
in here. So
and that's the trade-off.
yeah.
But at the very least, I think there are options for both fighters, and that's good. This didn't ruin either fighter. They're still both popular, and we still should have both around.
Totally.
But I was hoping for more, a more robust undercard, which we always are when it comes to pay-per-views, and we almost never get them. But the a co-main event, the co-feature, whatever you want to call it, it was a much better fight than I expected it to be and than I thought it would
Hell
be
of a
when we were
fight.
talking about it on the preview, which I'm definitely very thankful for. We got to see a young Jesse Bam Rodriguez defeat Israel González. I thought that at the very least one of those scores, what was it, 118, 109? Yeah, that was no
Nah,
good.
that was
Even
pretty.
117, 110 is kind of tough to buy. It was a pretty close fight. Israel Gonzalez gave him a lot more work than I thought Bam Rodriguez was going to get. We were talking about this before we started recording, dude. Bam Rodriguez had a really busy year. He's young and he's been through a lot in a fairly short period of time, and it's possible that he might need a little bit of a break, even if he did win that
Especially,
fight last night.
especially being at his size, man. He's still a small guy in the division he's in, even though he's a world champion. When you think about it, right? He came in as a late replacement to fight Carlos Quadras, for the vacant strap. Came in, won that fight really, really impressively as well. That highlight reel of him pulling the Orlando Canizales angle when he lands that uppercut to drop Quadras, so it's ingrained in everyone's mind. But in my mind, I think he's the 2022 fighter of the year so far. Like he's had a beautiful year, man. He beat Quadras, and then after that, he fights Sor Rungvisai, the Rat King, who holds two wins over Chocolatito and just one of the baddest of the badasses of that era. And that was a breakout fight for him. I worked that fight too. I was counting Sarung Pasai for that fight. And not only did Bam like put on a beautiful show, he went through adversity. Like I said, like we both said, he's a smaller guy for that division. And Sarung Pasai, not only is he a strong guy, he's just built, man, like most Thai fighters with those strong calves, just a really strong, brutish type guy.
Dude, just a piece of concrete.
Absolutely. And you can't hurt them. You know what I mean? Everything you throw at them, you hit them with, they keep on coming. Look at all the amount of punches Chocolatito hit Sarung Pasai within their first fight. And even had him running in the last round. But like still the guy, like he just never really went down. And Bam just
unreal.
That was a beautiful performance, man. Everything that he threw, he kept on going and going and going and kept on elevating. As Sarung Pasai got a little bit stronger and threw more, Bam kept on elevating himself before he finally broke him down and stopped him. And that was a star-making performance. Like everybody was ready to annoy him, as they should. But you got to realize too, man, he did take some, punishment in that fight. He took punishment in the Quadras fight as well. And these are guys that are naturally bigger than him and stronger than him when you think about it physically. And even though he's like a young kid, like, you might like, I'm not going to like, I don't want to say style wise, but like you can compare him most like Fernando Vargas in terms of like, being young and going through the ringer with these, really, really tough fights, because eventually they might hit the wall. And last night, Bam, with a guy that was more unheralded, obviously much more than Quadras and especially Sarung Pasai, I wouldn't say he hit the wall, but he struggled a little bit. This is the first fight that you could see, he was like, it's been a rough year for him, for a guy, especially in a division that he's kind of debuted in. He's undersized and he's fighting type quality competition. Yeah, man, it was a tough fight for him.
Yeah, it was far tougher than I thought it would be. Gonzalez, like you said, he came in with the right strategy. Like he really kind of made the most out of his performance and was doing really well early on. He kept doing this thing where it almost looked like just a really old school kind of maneuver, even though it was really simple, and it's not old school. It's just anybody could do it. But, it was the orthodox versus southpaw. And instead of trying to like do the normal thing that I guess is taught against, if you're an orthodox fighter against a southpaw, you do a lead right hand or you use your jab a lot. And he was using his jab, but one of the things he was trying to do was walk Bam Rodríguez into this weird right uppercut into the body. And he kept landing. It was like more to almost his chest, like his like solar plexus area. And he kept throwing it like just over and over and over. And the angle, and because Bam Rodríguez is always looking to attack in a very offensive minded fighter, was walking right into it. And it was almost like he didn't really seem to know what to do for a little bit. And obviously he got going. He started catching up kind of midway through the fight and started laying the wood on Gonzalez in a few rounds there. And Gonzalez, you could tell, was like, oh shit, I better do something. And he did. He also adjusted. It was a really good technical fight. The scores, in my opinion, didn't really reflect the difficulty of it. And overall,
it's always the case.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's unfortunately we can't depend on that. But either way, overall, I think that it was a good fight for Bam Rodríguez in the sense that it gave him adversity. He had to work through, kind of think his way through the fight. He had to find a way to win against the guy who came to win. And so that's the kind of thing that should help him in the long run, I would imagine. Although, like you just said, it was just almost kind of like a third fight in the row where he took a decent amount of punches. So you had said earlier that they're talking about maybe putting him back in again in December. I get it, keep him busy. I'm not saying keeping him busy is a bad idea, but also after 3 fights like that, give him a gimme or just give him another month or 2, dude. And let him get a good break after the fucking holidays or something. Cause it's been a rough year, dude. It's been a tough year for the kid.
I mean, it's already September, and say he had won this fight pretty much unscathed. He had stopped, and stopped this guy in like 4 rounds or so. Then I would totally say throw him back in one more time in December just to cap off a spectacular year. And I'm sure that he would, most consensus would agree with that. But this was a taxing fight last night. Like he got caught with a lot of punches. It was tough. And the thing that was interesting is that like his opponent, what he was doing a lot was that like he had a jab if he wanted to use it, it was decent, but most of the time it wasn't so much that he was like jabbing, is that like he was just using it as a like he was just gauging his speed, like he was just probing. That's not an actual jab. You're just probing at that point, just trying to get distance. But like you said, Pat, every time he did that, he would come in, start looping with awkward shots to the body, start looping to the head, other stuff like that. And he was also moving with Bam Rodriguez when Bam would start using those angles. Like a lot of people have
He was a tricky dude.
very tricky and very crafty. So like a lot of people compared Bam Rodriguez to Orlando Canizales, the incredible Hall of Fame junior bantamweight champion from
Texas, I
the
think,
90s.
right?
Yeah, from Texas. Yeah, from the 90s. And when you watch him, you see the angles that he would throw and stuff like, Canizales was incredible. And Rodriguez, same thing. But like I mentioned earlier, that knockdown that he scored against Quadras, the way he just kind of leapt to the side, boop, caught him with an uppercut. Quadras goes down, everything like it's beautiful to see. And so the similarities are there. But if you like, as the commentators in one of the rare instances where they were making sense, I think it was Sergio or someone else mentioned it, where if you move with them when they're doing the angles, it kind of becomes somewhat useless what they're doing. And was it Rodriguez was able to do stuff like that, and so like Bam was struggling.
Yeah, it really almost kind of like Canelo,
Yeah,
a fighter who's like reliant on that kind of rhythm and the timing. And if you're and there are really small things that you can do as an opponent working against that to throw that timing off and to
totally.
disrupt it with just even just kind of fighters get so used to just kind of the same rhythm and the same kind of like one, two, three,
Yep,
one,
yep.
two, three, four, like that type of shit. Whereas if you just vary it up and just, one, like that kind of shit
Exactly.
where it's like really stuttery and you use a lot of feints, like that can really throw those kinds of fighters off. And obviously it's easier said than done. I'm just some fucking fat guy sitting here talking about it. But the point being that it can be done. And we saw it done last night. Israel González did a really good job. And it was the kind of performance where I think that he probably earned himself yet another TV shot against a high level fighter with a performance like that, or perhaps he did just good enough to deter that because now motherfuckers like, no, I'm not fighting that guy. I don't know. It's tough to say, but I'd
I
like
mean,
to
at
see it
that
again.
division, I think that like he's definitely in the mix at least,
Yeah,
for hopefully for another title shot or a
I'd
top.
like to see him again.
Totally, totally.
Yeah, it was so beyond that, dude, it wasn't really, like I said, it was unfortunate it wasn't a very deep card. Austin Williams got a little bit more work than we thought he would against Kieran Conway after opening up looking really good. And Ali Akhmedov, who's in the Golovkin camp and has trained with him somewhat extensively, at least in this camp, he looked pretty good against Gabriel Rosado. I mean, not that Rosado was ever really in the fight whatsoever. It was just that I would have liked to see Akhmedov kind of like switch gears a little bit more than he did. But it was a very disciplined performance against somebody who not that long ago scored a kind of scary knockout. So I get it. But yeah, when you're paying like $85, I understand the idea that you want a little bit deeper card than that, even if it was entertaining.
Absolutely, man. Look, we're not talking about the days of Bob Arum pumping Butterbean and Mia St. John, for you guys to pay $65 to watch De La Hoya fight somebody like, Wilfredo Rivera. But like at the same time, I totally get the sentiment. You know, the undercard wasn't really, really strong at that point, and you think, all right, I'm paying this amount of money. Why can't I get like a quality card where it's going to be like, world title fights all the way through, or something where it's going to be like, top quality, yada, yada, yada. But it's the boxing business. It's the way it goes. It's the way it is. And the zone also catches extra flack as well because they're the ones who pushed from the very beginning, hey, we're not going to be doing pay-per-view. We're not going to be doing this and that. Where the new way pay-per-view is dead. Everything is going to be the same amount. You're just you're going to get all this shit into one package of what you pay for the subscription. And early on, it looked like that would be the case. Clearly, that hasn't been the case now.
Yeah.
Boxing always goes back to what it is. You know what I mean? No matter what, everybody always says that they have a new that they always that they have a new thing that they're gonna like try to flip the script and oh, don't worry about it, everything is gonna be different. This new format is gonna be the future.
Oh,
Within like
it's funded. It's paid
yeah,
for.
yeah, yeah. Within a year and a half, everything goes back to the same format it's always been, tried and true. And we're the same jaded, pissed off boxing fans who say we're not paying for this shit. And rightfully so. Don't get me wrong, man. If you want to pay for it, you pay for it. If you don't, you don't. I have no qualm left or right, whatever you want to go with, because each of you have a right for it.
Yep.
Just don't try to push your agenda on me. Like, if you're a person who wants to pay for this shit, be like, oh, you don't pay for this, you're not a true boxing fan.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Shut up. All right, I don't want to hear that crap.
Yeah, I'm allowed to say whether or not something's worthy of my money or not. Like,
exactly.
You're not. Yeah, that has nothing to do with you. But unfortunately, there's a little bit of an elephant in the room that I am going to have to address. And you don't have to say nothing. I'll absorb it. But dude, straight up, like, I'm not trying to be biased, and I know that I do have a bias in this area, but I'm trying to set that aside. But bro, the production was so bad last night. It was bad. The sound, like, literally, I have really good speakers. Like, and I like, I'm listening to my shit, surround sound, whatever. And my speakers were like the entire time. And I was like, yo, I adjusted my speakers. I even went into my computer and like started fucking looking at the audio and taking recordings of the audio to make sure it's not my own computer. And like, is this shit coming from me? No, dude. It was like, and you could tell because as soon as they went to Diamante or anybody else on the mic, their mic was cutting in and out, all this type of shit. And I was like, oh no, this is DAZN's audio. I don't know what's going on. I'm not a fucking expert, never worked in production like that. So I can't say. All I know is that my speakers were hating life last night, bro. And my ears weren't liking it a whole lot much better either. And in any case, that coupled with just these kind of the weird stuff that DAZN goes through on some of these shows where they're like clearly out of time and they're trying to look for time to kill is like, I'm not a huge fan, dude. I'm just not a huge fan at all. And I wish that we're a little bit more polished for the price. And that's one of the reasons why when they're talking about doing joint pay-per-views with DAZN, I was just like, no, that makes no sense, because these other entities have far more experience pulling off pay-per-views and doing this production in a far more polished way. And some fans don't give a fuck. They're going to watch the fight and they don't care about the production. Some people do. And it also gives an air of professionalism when it's far snappier, far cleaner, and whatever. Like I said, I don't want to go on a big rant. It was not the best last night, and it was really unfortunate, dude, because that's, like, if not our sport's biggest star in Canelo, it's one of the top two stars in the sport, probably now the biggest star in the sport. And to see it handled that way and on a card that's like not super great, it's unfortunate, dude. It's just not what I want to see, and definitely not what I want to hear. Ozeki.
Totally, man. And like, I think the spacing, and this has been an ongoing thing for most pay-per-view cards. Like, especially when they have the main event scheduled for a specific time. So like, if you had the main event, can't go any earlier than 11:30 p.m. or something like that. If all the preliminary fights end really early, you just have all this downtime instead of just pushing the main event really early and everybody can go home happy, whatever it may be. No, we have to sit there and we have to like go through all these different scenarios, all these different interviews, story packages, all kinds of other different shit.
And you could always tell too, because you hear like, and it's like they pan back out and there's this camera and dudes sitting there and they're like, so tell me, when we're talking, and it's like, dude, I'm the master of bullshitting, and I know when you're bullshitting, bro.
Well, yeah, there's like, I think the most glaring example might have been De La Hoya Pacquiao, because remember all those early preliminary fights ended literally just within a round.
Yeah, that was painful.
That was one of the most horrific undercards ever, aside from like when Bob Arum would push Sideshow X. But like when you would have when you had that fight, I think the main fight before De La Hoya Pacquiao was Victor Ortiz against Jeffrey Resto. And that fight ended after a round and a half. And it was still like 10 p.m. or something. Like, it was some stupid time. Like, it was really early. And everyone just kind of like, so now what? Like, They really had to kill time for all that type of stuff, and that gets really, really bad. You know what I
Or
mean?
Jeff Resto. It's like years after getting embarrassed by Carlos Mouse on ESPN. Poor guy.
Yeah. Don Magic getting embarrassed by Don Flamenco.
With the yeah, at least he didn't get him with the nail in the coffin punch like he did Viv Harris though. Got him with the old
But like I totally get what you mean, man. It's tough, bro. And like with people complaining and griping about what they have to pay for and what's going on, especially with the quality of fights and all that, it's justified. And it should be. And that's something that the average fan has to deal with since pay-per-view has been, in its inception.
Yeah, when stuff looks and sounds cheap, it's just the way it comes off, dude. And anyway, that's all. So it was unfortunate for that but that wasn't even like the main takeaway for me. I appreciated the fight, and I definitely am appreciative that the trilogy is closed out in like a, in a way where we get closure, in a way where like, there was a definitive ending, at least seemed that way.
And they seem calm. That's the main thing, man. They both seem content with what happened. Thank God.
And I didn't hear or see anyone reacting like they felt they were ripped off or anything like that. At least I didn't. So it seemed to me like, at least for the main event, people were like, okay.
It either seemed like, well, you paid what you got for, like you should have expected this, or oh yeah, it was a good fight. Like most people, when they, like the casual fan, when they pay for a fight, I don't know what they're expecting or anything like that, but like I think they're gonna get out of it. Okay, I paid for this. The fight happened. They just move on from it. They don't think anything of it. And when the next major fight happens, they'll pay for it too to have a party.
Yeah, it's us watching the undercard. Yeah. They don't give a fuck.
Exactly. So
yeah. So and that's a good point too. I think for the most part, people got what they wanted out of the fight card, and also I will say I just want to do a quick shout out also to ppv.com, who was showing the fight. There was a cool chat. Eddie Piolín Sotelo did a great job. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, that was really cool.
I've joined you on those chats.
That's true. Yeah.
For your admin, and they've been a lot of fun. So definitely.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, but I guess if you've ever been on Twitter during fights, it's pretty similar. People chatting during fights and stuff like that.
I mean, it's a bunch of fans getting together and just talking bullshit about boxing and during a big pay-per-view show. So it's awesome.
Well, dude, after an intense night of work, counting punches for you, dude, I appreciate you hopping on and talking some shop, bro. It's a good time.
Yeah, man, I'm feeling good. Feeling like it was a successful night. On to the next one. And like we said, man, we finally got to finish in definitive end to this trilogy. And next fight.
For sure. And also later on, I'm sure later on this week, we got some history shit cooking up. We'll do another show, some history stuff. We can't just do contemporary.
People, man, who was your favorite guy that you thought was going to be a major star in the sport that was a big bust? That's the next subject.
Yeah, dude, you might want to think about that a little bit.
Hell yeah.
Get that in your mind. No, dude, I appreciate it for sure. Good, overall a good card, enjoyable card, and everybody who listened into this, look, we appreciate you. We really do, especially coming in hot the next day with our recap. Thanks so much. If you listened in via the podcast apps, go ahead and subscribe and leave us a message there if you would, a comment. If you watched, thank you so much, and subscribe on YouTube. Also leave a reply. A lot of people have been leaving replies lately, which I really appreciate. I need to go reply to some of those as well, actually. But Knuckles and Gloves podcast is also on social media, the usual social media like Facebook and Instagram, but also we're on Twitter and individually too. We are on Twitter. My boy Aris here is on Twitter as Punch Zone Aris. Me, Patrick Connor, I'm there as Patrick M. Connor. So go ahead and interact, say hi. Aris, I'll talk to you soon, bro.
Have a good one, everyone.
Later, everybody.